Okay, everybody, welcome back to Brian for Liberty. Thank you very much. If you have found me on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify, I appreciate it. If you're following me here, if you're watching me here on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Check out my prior videos because I reference those a lot as I go. And hopefully you'll enjoy the content and be back for more. If you're listening to me on Spotify, go ahead and follow. And I'm going to try and put up more podcasts that are unique just to Spotify as opposed to just my YouTube videos. So I'm looking to add Spotify content on a more daily basis that's unique to what I'm doing here on YouTube. So whether you're watching me on YouTube or listening to Spotify, head over there and follow. So I did what I do in the morning, and that is to jump on the late night programming. That's what I like to do in the morning. I'm not a late night guy, so I like to get up in the morning, see what the talking heads in the evening had to say. And guess what? We've got the kind of the same thing that we've always seen, and that is that they're piling on the president as usual regarding what he knew and when he knew it, and talking about how poorly handled the coronavirus response has been. It almost seems like the left-leaning media is starting to be a little disappointed that this isn't turning into the bigger tragedy. And I know that's a callous thing to say, but they're not focusing on the results right now. And that's disturbing to me because when this thing started, we initially looked at, hey, we could potentially see over 1 million deaths in this country. And then that number went to 100 to 240,000. Then it went down to about 80. And I think the latest guidance from Dr. Fauci is that we are looking at potentially as low as 60,000. And I know I say as low as 60,000, and I don't mean to dismiss this as anything less than an absolute tragedy, but the fact of the matter is that we took what could have been a much, much larger, a much bigger crisis, and it seems to be that the response has been adequate and maybe even better than adequate to reduce the numbers significantly from what we initially thought. So it's very interesting that they are still so focused on what was happening in January and who knew what, when, and all that stuff. And that's all fine. I think there should be, should there be an investigation? Should there be some conversation about, hey, what was going on? Did we ignore certain things? Were we not properly prepared? Could we have done a better job? But to look at the numbers as they initially came out and then look at the numbers at where they are today, it's very hard to say, oh, the president has done a horrible job. And that's not what you're hearing. They're not saying that he's done a horrible job because they can't focus on the results, because if they focus on the results, there's no argument that things have improved dramatically. The forecasts have improved dramatically. And the other side of this is if they're going to talk about how the president didn't react fast enough to this, that's fine. But then can we not ignore the Democrats at that time? Can we not ignore Nancy Pelosi in Chinatown telling people, hey, come down and join me, we're here? Can we not talk about Joe Biden calling the president hysterical and xenophobic because he wanted to restrict travel coming from China? The late night, this left-leaning biased media is really starting to get on my nerves. And look, I'm not a Trump supporter. We're gonna talk about the economic side of this thing and where that's going, but it's so biased and so one-sided that I find it very irritable. And I know I've kind of been pounding on that every day, but at the bottom line is that it's not doing us any good. Here's a couple of clips from last night's shows from Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers.
When this nightmare got started, he kept saying, it'll be fine, it's like the flu, it's no big deal, all you have to do is paint your face orange, you'll be okay. But we learned yesterday that one of his top advisors, Peter Navarro, warned him in January and February. He wrote a memo saying that this would be very bad, there would be a lot of deaths. But Trump, as you might imagine, has a different way of looking at that.
When Peter Navarro did circulate those memos, you were still downplaying the threat of coronavirus in the U.S. You were saying things like, I think it's a problem that's going to go away within a couple of days.
It will go away.
You said within a couple of days the cases will be down to 0.
For a closer look. It seems like almost every day we get more and more evidence that the Trump administration knew well in advance of the very real threat of a pandemic, and that they both ignored it and lied to the American people about it.
And like I said, they're ignoring the Democrats. Where's the criticism of Nancy Pelosi? I have not seen a single one of these late night shows go, look, and here's what Nancy Pelosi was doing in January, and here's what Joe Biden was doing in January. Nobody's doing that. They're focusing solely on what the president knew, and they're ignoring the results, and they're ignoring the fact that this crisis has started to shrink in size. I guess that's probably the best. It's still a crisis. It's still tragic, but the management of it has shrank what appeared to be a massive impact and has shrank that down significantly. So it's really hard to say that it hasn't been handled properly. So that's kind of where I'm a little irritated, and it kind of gets me spun up in the morning, especially when I've had a few cups of coffee. But just wanted to hit on that. Now, on the other side of this is something that's being ignored by a lot of the mainstream outlets. We're talking about unemployment, and we're talking about, the economic recession, the economic fallout from coronavirus. You are hearing that, but we're not talking enough, I think, about the debt and the stimulus and the money that's being spent. Yesterday's video, I shared that it looked like Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump are already coming to an agreement on a second economic stimulus, and that the size of that bill is probably going to be another $1 trillion. I would imagine, as government does, it'll be larger than that. These numbers I'm pounding on all the time, but we're looking at potentially having $28 trillion in debt by the end of the next fiscal, based on the stimulus spending, the obvious slowdown in economics, and the deficit, the planned budget deficit going into this fiscal, based on the last budget that was signed. So $28 trillion in debt is seemingly a very realistic number, and that should scare people, because we don't even know how bad the economic fallout from this is. It looks like anywhere from 10 to 17 million people have applied for unemployment just over the last few weeks. There's going to be massive fall in demand. There's going to be I think that even if we open the economy up tomorrow and all the stay-at-home orders were dropped tomorrow, you're still going to see a lot of hesitation for people to go back out and engage in a lot of activities that involve crowds. So I think just the return to any kind of normalcy is going to be slow. And couple that with the massive layoffs, the massive unemployment, it is going to take a long time for our economy to come out of this. And now we're going to be faced with this massive headwind of trillions of dollars of new debt. And you put that all together, and it's very difficult to say, yeah, we're going to be okay, or we're going to come out of this in any fashion where our economy is going to look like it should. So that's what we're really dealing with here, is a massive economic crisis. And I genuinely believe that we're going to have a currency issue here. I believe that the dollar is absolutely going to lose its status as a reserve currency, and I'm not sure what's going to replace that. I don't think there's an individual currency that can step in and do that. And I'm genuinely looking at an International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. There are headlines out there that the European Union could fail based on this. There's a lot of stuff happening, and I would keep a very close eye on that side of this, and the economic side of this, and what's going to happen moving forward. And I'm not trying to raise any conspiracies here about, you hear it all the time from, New World Order and all these kinds of things, but we have to look at the reality of the U.S. currency at this point. As the global reserve currency, there's a couple of things going on here outside of just the coronavirus. There's the massive addition of the debt. There's also the oil war that's going on, the price war that's going on in the Middle East. That's going to have a major impact on the U.S. dollar. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that, as we come out of the pandemic side of this and we start looking closer at the economics of it all, that I think we're going to wake up to a very different world. And I just think that we should all be preparing for that reality, because I think that's the next phase. That's the next crisis. And moving forward, I'm going to be talking a lot more about the economics of this thing and a lot less about the politics of it. And just as an end, I would like to say, farewell to Bernie Sanders, suspended his presidential campaign. Obviously, this will be the last time based on his age, this will be the last time he's able to run. So I think that the end of the Bernie Sanders era, when you look at Joe Biden there's not a passing of the baton to somebody who has the same beliefs that Bernie Sanders has. So you can't look at a Joe Biden and say this is a person who's principled and sticks to his ideology, sticks to his guns no matter what, like Bernie Sanders. I disagree with Bernie Sanders on virtually every single one of his policies and everything that he'd want to do to the economy. I pretty much disagree with Bernie Sanders on. But I will say this: he has been principled and consistent from the beginning, no matter how misguided I think he is. If more politicians were as principled as he was and as stuck to their guns the way they did, I think the political system in this country would look a lot better. So Bernie Sanders has been a lot of fun, beating up on his economic policies and talking about that. And he's a real character in economics or in politics, and I think he's going to be missed on the stage. I respect his principle stand. I respect his consistency, even if I don't agree with his policies, and I wish him all the best. So thank you all for stopping by and taking a listen. Once again, I'm going to ask you to subscribe if you enjoy the content. Follow me on Spotify at Brian for Liberty on Spotify, and we will see you next time.